All right, folks, welcome to another episode of On the Delo. This is episode 112. That's 112 for those of you that are a little slow. What color do you like? I didn't even ask you.
I don't care.
Dude, what's like
that's
blue?
cool.
You just don't care.
Purple.
Like,
I like all
cool.
Just rotate them.
I'm rotating the Delo colors here.
Just have them rotate.
So I have my friend Lorenzo, not to be confused with Lorenzo.
Yeah.
But Lorenzo.
That's it.
Dude, I mean, it just rolls off of my tongue so well. Does anybody call you Lawrence?
If you knew me before college, I get it occasionally. But I always thought, man, I still have that conversation with my parents. Like, what were you thinking? It's like an old man's name. But the funny thing is, my parents always called me Lorenzo in Spanish because my mom is from Nogales and my dad's Spanish-Italian. And so there's a whole story behind that. But
dude, Spanish-Italian?
Yeah.
How sexy is that?
Yeah, and Mexican-American.
Are you like the most romantic man in the world?
No, man. I got a lot of fiery personality, though, man.
Do you really?
It's in
You're
the
so
DNA.
chill,
I know everyone says that, but yeah.
Whoa, who's more fiery, you or your wife?
Definitely Kimber.
Yeah.
We both can get going, though. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, you're probably just two peas in a pod. That's so funny. And then ASU for you, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So what's funny is as we're discussing off air, I just had DeMarco in here. Mm-hmm. He was ASU.
Totally.
And then we're doing 3 podcasts today. So anybody that's listening, this is 2 of 3, and then the next guest I have, she's from ASU as well.
Oh, no way!
But she flew in from San Francisco to come and do the podcast.
No way!
So
3 Sun Devils.
4. Me.
Oh, you? That's right.
Yeah.
Dude.
I know, right?
Go Devils.
So let's start. Yeah, go Devils. Now, where are you originally from?
Born and raised here.
Okay,
Phoenix,
so you're a native like I am.
Yep.
Very cool. And then what year did you graduate?
I graduated ASU in 95, high school in 90.
Okay, so I was right, I guess, behind you because I was 92 and 96.
Yeah.
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 And what'd you get your degree in?
Architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how?
It took me 5 years to do it, but I got it.
You got it done. Is that a hard? I mean, it's got to be hard,
intense.
right?
Yeah. When we went through, you had to apply. You had to apply to upper division, and so I remember on average they scare the hell out of you. They're like, "Hey, 300 people start this major. By the time you apply for upper division, maybe 150, and there's only 45 seats."
Oh my gosh!
It was very intensely competitive, and then. If you didn't get in, you either tried it again the next year. It was a whole year you had to wait, or you moved on to another major. So
why it took you 5 years?
Yeah, no. I actually had to work through college to put myself through.
Oh, go figure.
Yeah. And so the workload was intense. I almost quit my freshman year. It was just too intense. And my advisor, did not accept my resignation. In fact, he spent like 2 hours with me one day. It's a beautiful story. And, I'm so grateful because had he taken my resignation, I don't know if I'd be here or have accomplished what I've accomplished. And so he just said, "Hey, listen, what's the issue?"
Yeah.
I said, I'm stressed out. I don't think I can do this. The math's too much. I came out of an inner city high school, Central High School.
Okay.
And I just wasn't academically prepared. I was in honors and AP, but like my math was really kind of struggling, and I had to work. So the workload, I had to work part-time, and so just taking 18 hours and doing it well, I just thought, there's just no way I'm going to do it.
How much of how much is math? Is it half of it?
You have to take a decent amount. I always tell people it's a bridge between art and engineering. I mean, you really do ride the edge. So, like, you have to take physics and brief calculus, and you have to do structures classes and statics, and so there's a lot of math involved in those.
Right.
And so I just didn't have a core confidence in it. And this advisor just said, "Hey, listen, how old are you?" And at the time, I was always been young because I was born in August, and so I was always youngest in my age group.
Yeah.
At the time, I think I was 18, and he's like, "So you're going to get out of college at 21 instead of 20 or whatever?" And he's like, "So why don't we just take an extra year and let's just spread it out and do undergrad over 3 years and apply for upper division on the 4th year? That way you do your classes, you get your GPA, you get your studios, you're not stressed." He's like, "You have a whole life to live. Let's take some of that pressure off you." And so we did. We mapped it all out, and it went to plan. And I applied a year after the class. So I applied with the class that came in after me and got in. Yeah, it was crazy. It was nerve-wracking, but I was number 12 out of 45 in my class, so I felt pretty good.
You should feel good.
Yeah.
So going back to a little bit before this, like kind of in your beginnings, like you said, you went kind of probably like a rougher neighborhood sort of thing. What was your like childhood experience? And you have siblings, or?
I do. I have an older brother. He's 4 years older than me.
Okay.
Yeah. We grew up at like 20th Avenue in Camelback area. Yeah. So my brother went to Alhambra High School. I ended up going to Central. The whole other funny story, I did not want to go to Central. They changed our district and ended up going to getting accepted to Brophy, which was awesome.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a fit for me, and economically it wasn't a fit for me. But I just wanted to prove to myself that I could get in. And all my friends were next door at Central. And the funny story about that is in 86 through 90, those two schools were really pretty close socially. A lot of my friends grew up in North Central, and a lot of these kids went to like same elementary school like Madison Meadows or wherever. And we went to the same parties, and a lot of mutual friends, a lot of kids grew up together. And so even today, professionally, I see a lot of guys that, I went to parties with, and Boondockers are very successful commercial real estate guys. I always joke with them, I'm like, what is it with you Brophy dudes? Man, it's like, it's Brophy, U of A, fraternities, and now they're in commercial real estate, all of them. So
wow.
It's kind of funny.
So as a kid, you were obviously smart and going through school, and you made good grades and all that. What do you think was the, I don't know, the thing that clicked with you that said, I'm going to go to college and, do this sort of thing? Were you into buildings, or?
Yeah, it's funny. So, I look back and I think of how I ended up here. So Central Avenue was really interesting to me because I went to school downtown, basically. Yeah. And I remember clearly one night going to a football game, and I'm very visual, so I'm very visual. I'm very observant. I remember going to a football game. We were parked, and we were walking up to the stadium, and the backdrop is downtown Phoenix, and seeing the buildings all lit up. And it's not like we have this huge skyline, but it was enough to get my attention. I'm like, wow, this is so cool that I'm going to school down here.
Right.
And I was just sort of drawn to it. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is I was really into art and drawing, and I actually thought I was going to be a graphic designer or commercial artist of some sort. And so I just later on, I think it was like my senior year, I went to school in the morning. I was in a club called VICA. DECA. DECA.
Yeah.
And I went to school in the morning, and I worked in the afternoon. I worked for a graphic design firm. It was a graphic design commercial printing firm. And it was in that process, I was just delivering printing and learning business and all this stuff. And the guy would send me all over Metro Phoenix. And I really got to feel Metro Phoenix, like all the way out to like Chandler.
Yeah.
I'd go out to Surprise, wherever we had to deliver printing or whatever. Well, three of our biggest clients were contractors. You'll appreciate this. One of them was a company called Johnson Carlier, local general contractor. Another one was Sletton Construction. And the third one was Kitchell. And Kitchell was down off of 24th Street in the I-10.
Wow.
And I laugh about that because I delivered printing to them forever. And so when I fast forward between my junior and senior year of college, we had to do a professional internship. And I was struggling in my studios because I just didn't know how buildings went together, so construction-wise.
Right.
So I asked my intern advisor, hey, can I do my internship with a general contractor? And so I can learn how buildings go together. And he's like, that's fantastic. That's a great idea. No one's ever asked me. Let me see if that's possible. So he goes and asks and calls me and says, hey, I got you an internship with a general contractor. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. So totally unconventional. Everyone's like, why is he going to go intern with a general contractor? And he goes, a great firm. They just relocated off the 51 in Highland in Central Phoenix. And I just looked at him, and I go, is that Kitchell? And he goes, yeah, how do you know Kitchell? I'm like, well, we just did their whole rebranding for the relocation.
Yeah.
So I've been delivering printing for them for last 3 years or 4 years because I worked at the print through college. But it's funny that I ended up getting an internship with them, and then that's where I met my today business partner, John Kitchell, whose father started that company.
That was what, third?
That would have been 94.
Yeah.
I did that internship in 94.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And John's how old now?
John just turned 76 on Sunday.
76, yeah.
So he's like just such a rock in my life, such a friend and a brother, and I have so much respect for him.
Think about that from John's perspective. He was in his 40s when he met you.
Yeah.
Think about that,
That's
dude.
crazy.
Time
I know we were
flies.
laughing the other day going, man, it's been 30-some, like he saw me grow up. I mean, he really saw me grow up. So he's so, like, it's so funny. I would say he flatters me because he'll like brag and stuff, and I think he still sees me as that little guy,
Yeah.
He's seen me evolve, and I mean, he had I told you my story, man. He had such a leap of faith in me.
Well,
I
I wanted you to tell everybody else's story.
Yeah.
So you get the internship, you're doing that sort of stuff, with them, and then you graduate, and then where do you go?
So I graduate. It was funny. After that experience, it got me thinking, like, man, I don't know if I want to do architecture or if I want to do construction. I really enjoyed it. I was like, there was just something fulfilling about seeing something go from paper to reality.
Yeah.
And I like business. I like people. I like the diversity of people you interact with. But I also have a very strong design desire for creative expression. And so I was kind of torn. So it's funny. I got out of college and it was 95, and we're just still coming out of the S&L thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I went into architecture school, and everyone's like, why are you going into architecture? No one's in that industry. People are, like, killing themselves.
The world's going down.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But by the time I got out, I just figured, well, shoot, I'm going to be in school for 5 years. Maybe things will change. So in 95, I just shotgunned my resume to architects, general contractors, and development companies.
Okay.
Because I thought, well, I could probably, any of those would be interesting. And Kitchell wouldn't hire me. They said, hey, go make sure you don't want to be an architect. Like, go explore it.
Right.
Like, go do that. You've worked hard to do that. If you don't want to do that and you think construction's the thing, like, come see us. But they kind of kicked me out the door like a loving parent. Like, go spread your wings and see if you want to do that. So I did. I worked I landed 2 opportunities with architecture firms. First one was doing small courtyard homes in North Scottsdale, and that was interesting. But then I got a really interesting opportunity to go work for a firm that was based in downtown Phoenix.
Yeah.
That was at the Arizona Center. And it was just way closer for me because I lived in Ahwatukee at the time, and we didn't have the 101 then, so I had to drive up Pima. And I was at like Via Linda and like Scottsdale or Hayden and Via Linda or something like that. And so I get this call one day, and this architecture firm says, hey, are you employed? I said, I am, but I'm like hating the drive all the way up here, to North Scottsdale from Ahwatukee. And they said, we have an opportunity. We'd like to interview you for, it's an intern architecture position. You'd be working towards licensing. But we like your experience with Kitchell, that you were architect, but you also did construction management. And I'm like, yeah. And so they said, we have an opportunity to contract an intern architect to the design build team that's going to build the Bank One ballpark in downtown Phoenix, which was huge at the time, right? And I was like,
big deal.
whoa,
Our first baseball team ever. Yeah.
Huge. Major League Baseball's coming. I'm like, wow, downtown Phoenix, close to home. Super interesting. So I go and interview with them, and I'm like, yeah, man, I'm in. So I was going to work in the firm for a few months until that deal kicked up, and then they were going to contract me to the construction manager through minority enterprise programs. They call it a MeBe-Weebie program, so minority business enterprise or women-owned business enterprise. When you have these big public projects, they want to create opportunities in the ecosystem of different sized businesses, especially minority businesses or women-owned businesses. So I was like a poster child, right? Lorenzo Perez, architecture kid from Central, from Central Phoenix. I know, I'm a covert. And so I go interview, and they're like, yeah, that's great. So then I basically worked for this architecture firm for a few months, and then I become this sort of contract employee for a company called Huber Hunt Nichols. They were the construction manager, and they basically were owner rep, essentially kind of an owner rep overseeing the construction for the stadium district that built the stadium. So, I mean, just everything was amazing. In fact, I told my boss at the time when I got that opportunity, he goes, you got to take that. I said, I'm torn, I don't want to leave you. And he's like, I'll fire you so you can go take that opportunity. He's like, that is a career
That's cool.
Deal. So he was really encouraging. He's like, listen, I'd love to keep you, but man, that will be so good for you. You're going to get exposed to like big projects and design and everything. And it was true. I mean, I look back on that. It was really a defining moment. It probably ignited my interest, one, in construction, but two, development, what can happen around community building and placemaking. I mean, that was the spark of downtown.
Yeah.
Because downtown was not.
No.
And there was just so many mixed feelings. We literally tore down an entire city block that was a pretty active arts district, warehouse district, and a lot of history in that part of town. And so that was my first exposure to redevelopment and demo and how we're losing culture and arts, and we're displacing people and cool old buildings. And there was one aspect, we're erasing the past, but we're looking towards the future. It was this really interesting situation.
Right.
And I just remember just being, observant with all that. But my favorite part of that project is in the south, would be the southeast corner of it, under the 7th Street overpass bridge. There's an old warehouse that we actually kept up. It has like the multi-gable roofs and the monitor skylights, and they like literally cut it into an L shape and left it standing, and they built the stadium to it, and they integrated it. It's still there. Like you got to go under 7th Street to see it, but it was cool how you could keep old and tie it into new. It was like one of my favorite spaces. I just thought, wow, this is wild in the history.
It's kind of giving you the antithesis for who you are today. And what you developed.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny because people say, how did you get into redevelopment of all things, or adaptive reuse? And
you're like, Bank One Ballpark.
Yeah, in hindsight, I look back. I didn't think about it at the time, but I'm like, man, it was that. My design background, I went on to eventually, after I was there like 2 years, and then I got an opportunity to go work for Kitchell again.
Yeah.
And I jumped on it.
You did?
And,
okay.
Yeah, and they were, I think they were a $100 million a year company. And that would have been in like 95 when I went back. And when I left them at the end of 2008, we were pushing close to $1 billion. So it was a crazy trajectory. Yeah. And that's a whole other story in terms of career opportunity and development. But I went back to Kitchell, and I just sort of ended up in creative positions because of my design background, and also because of the exposure I had to, that was big time construction at the stadium. I mean, it was like the biggest structural steel, utilities, shoring, excavation. That area was built where the old Chinatown was in the old red light district. So there was archaeological surveys, and it was just so much cool stuff. And then it was so tied to public community and economic development.
Did Kitchell kind of have a radar on you during this project? Or a little after?
I stayed in touch with some people, but it's a funny story, actually. I was asked to run some drawings to one of the architecture firms. That was my role for Hunt. I did document control, and I was making sure the drawings were constantly updated. It was they call it fast track design project, where design literally is a step ahead of construction. Okay. And so things are constantly evolving and changing. So they're reissuing documentation, and that was my job, was to make sure we always had the most current info. Yeah. So one day I had to run drawings to Leo A. Daly's office on Camelback or whatever, and I stopped to eat lunch on the way at Town and Country, and I run into a handful of Kitchell guys, and they're just like, hey, what are you doing now? I told them, and they're like, oh man, that sounds fascinating. And then they're just like, hey, are you happy there? Are you happy there? And
were you eating at Duck and Decanter by chance?
No, I forget. It was some sandwich shop there. But probably. I certainly did a lot of Duck and Decanter. But they just said, hey, if you're unhappy and you want to explore opportunities at Kitchell, they were surprised that I ended up in construction. They're like, hey, you decided you want to go into construction. Right. Like, man, we're looking for great people. We're growing. We're just on fire. We're busy. And so I was like, yeah, let's stay in touch. And
but this is before social media. This is before LinkedIn.
It was a total chance encounter. Yeah. I was literally running an errand for that project.
And did you guys kind of all know each other in like the architect Nerdville or whatever?
Well, these guys, Kitchell's right there at 51 and Highland. Yeah. So these guys were just eating in a nearby area, and we just literally to pass each other, like, hey, what's going on? What are you up to? And it was just a chance deal. So I said, yeah, I'll give you a call, let's talk. And so there was an opportunity to go, and I was invited to Kitchell to be, they call it a construction estimator. It's a project. I actually intern as an estimator, and we're on the front end of construction or development projects. We do all the budgeting and strategic planning for they call it pre-construction. But but again, with my design background, that's what I interned as an estimator. That's where I got exposed to the world of development. I was like, wow, I never thought about actually being part of city building, right? Like placemaking. Actually, I never really thought about office buildings or where we live, where we shop, where we work.
Right.
And it was fascinating. And so they said, we bring you back into estimating, but we're going to split you half-time commercial and half-time with our custom projects division. At the time, it was called custom homes. And I thought, let's go do it. And so I got in there. I got to work on some fascinating projects like DC Ranch and through visioning with like really cool creative developers like DMB at the time was on fire. Jeff Edmonds. I'm just thinking of some of these other guys. The West Rock who did Valley Ho. And
you're doing this for Kitchell for how long?
I was at Kitchell 12 years. 12 years. Yeah. So I was an estimator probably for like three and a half, and then they moved me into the field. I actually was a project engineer, project manager. So I actually was on sites building.
Okay.
And then I went to California to follow a super important billionaire client to do custom homes.
Super important.
Yeah. And I actually rejected the offer. I said, I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel like going there. And they basically said, we're really not asking. It was one of those things. I'm like, okay, I'm so glad I did it. But we opened an office in Santa Barbara. I think it still exists there.
Yeah.
And we did like super high-end homes for this client. Like it was insane.
So that kind of leads me into the question. And you had told me this story the other day, and I wanted to get this repeated on tape because I just think it's fucking great. So what ends up happening? What was the kind of that moment where you're just like, I'm just gonna go do my own thing?
I'm gonna go do my thing. Yeah. Well, I went into architecture. I always tell people on the vision of that romantic image of an architect as an artist, builder, had his own practice. And so like that was the old school image that I thought, man, that'd be fun to work, design, build, and own my own stuff. Of course, at the time, I thought that was architect, not developer or builder or whatever. Mm-hmm. So while I was at Kitchell doing my thing, learning the business of construction and development, I had this like creative itch. That's what I told you. Like I always had these competing interests. Like I learned later on in life that I'm insanely balanced between right and left brain. And if I am too much of right, I need a counterbalance into the left. And if I'm too in the left, I need the counterbalance for right. So I just remember thinking I need to do something. So I learned about real estate investing, and I was like, wow, that seems cool, like flipping homes or rehabbing homes, or that's an opportunity to do all my interests. I was interested in business. I was interested in wealth building. I was interested in design and construction. And I'm like, wow, that'd be fun. Like I could do it all there. So I started learning how to do real estate investing and, read all the you get rich quick books and stuff. And people would make fun of me and laugh at me. And I'm just like, hey, man, I'm all about knowledge. I don't care. Don't judge me. But So I leaped into buying my first investment property when I was like 25 years old, trying these creative finance strategies. And I'm like, wow, this shit works. I can't believe it.
Who's laughing now?
I know, who's laughing now? Exactly. So I started doing, just for investing purposes and a creative outlet, I started doing that on the side. So I always told people I had a day job and a night job. Yeah. So my lunchtime, I was always reading stuff. And at night after work, we didn't have kids. I was married. And it was just like a hobby and passionate. But what I started seeing is what I was learning from my night job was actually making me a better professional in my day job. Mm-hmm. Like I literally could have conversations with developers and understand what they're talking about with like underwriting projects and stuff. And I think I was even shocking some of my peer supervisors were like, how do you know this stuff? And I remember one developer in particular, a guy named Scott Lyon at West Rock, we were working on Hotel Valley Ho, and I remember him saying, he's like, God, you're so different for an estimator. He's like you understand real estate.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I find it fascinating. And I'm like, I was intrigued. I didn't know what a developer was, but I'm like, so he was one of many developers who are like, I'm like, hey, what's a pro forma? I was just a curious kid, man.
Yeah.
I've always liked to learn. So I'm like, hey, how do you put a project together? And that's where I learned that people love to tell you their stories.
Oh,
How'd you get here? How did you get here? And I'm like, wow, this guy had no design background or construction background. He was a business guy or a dentist who became, who bought real estate and got into it. So I was just like, wow, these people come from all walks of life and this and that. And I just remember being intrigued with it. But you're talking about like, so it was in the back of my mind. I'm like, I could do this one day. To answer your question, I could do this one day, and I'd love to work for myself. I'm like, well, this is kind of back to my dream of like, I like to design, own, and operate. So there was 2 defining moments for me. One was we were doing so Kitchell had a development arm,
right,
and I was an estimator on the project. We used to do these things called power centers, the big retail things, and we would do these joint venture partnerships, Kitchell's development team, with landowners that usually were farmers and suburban communities. And I'm just sitting in as an assistant to the lead estimator, but I'm helping them do this thing. And we're on break, and I'm sitting next to the landowner, the farmer guy, and he looks at me and he goes, hey, what do you do for Kitchell? Are you an estimator? I'm like, yeah, I'm estimating. So I was a junior estimator, and he asked me like, what do you think of this stuff? I'm like, oh, I love development. It's fascinating and stuff. And he's like, so he was just asking me all these questions. I'm like, wow. And he's just like, what you want to be a builder, and this? And I'm like, nah. I go, yeah, I think so, And I go, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to go into grad school or not. I go, I think I'd like to get into development. I really find it fascinating. And he said, well, what do you mean, grad school? What do you want to study? And I'm like, I don't know, MBA in finance. I don't think they even had MRED programs at the time, but I was just like, maybe an MBA in finance with emphasis in real estate. But I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to go back to school. Like, I'm having fun. I'm learning so much, practicing. And so he says, well, what kind of developer? Do you want to go work for a big firm like a Heinz or a Cousins or something like that? And or do you want to do your own projects? And I said, I want to do my own projects. I want to like design them, build them, own and operate them. He's like, well, you want to be an entrepreneurial developer.
Did this guy have a cowboy hat?
No, I don't think so. They usually had boots though.
Boots? Yeah, okay.
So he goes, well, if you want to be an entrepreneur, why you don't need grad school. It was so funny. It was so matter of fact. And I'm like, he's like shooting it down.
You're wasting your money on that shit.
Seriously, he's like, you don't need grad school. He's like, when he looks at me, he goes, well, how do you know you even have the appetite to be an entrepreneur? Like, I go, what do you mean? He goes, like, how do you know you have the appetite to take the risk, to actually conceive an idea and actually take it from idea to reality? And I said, I don't know. I just think I could do it. And he goes, well, instead of spending your money on grad school, why don't you go try to do a project? And he goes, how are you going to pay for grad school? I'm like, well, I'm probably going to have to work part-time and take a student loan out. And he goes, if you do a good deal on your first one, you maybe could go to grad school for cash and not have to do it. And he's like, so maybe you should think about that. And it was
you
really,
remember that conversation?
Yeah. And then his next question, I use it with, because I get to talk to the MRED students at ASU all the time. His next question, I never forgot it. He looks at me and he goes, all right. And he goes, cattle rancher or dairy farmer? I look at him like, what are you talking about? He goes, cattle rancher or dairy farmer? And I go, I'm sorry, man, I'm not following. He goes, think about it. Cattle rancher, he goes, they fatten up their cows and then they kill them for money. And a dairy farmer fattens up their cow, and they nurture them, and they just milk them. He goes, speculator or investor? And like, I remember just thinking, wow. And I was like, wow. And I said, I don't know. He goes, well, he's a dairy farmer or cattle rancher. He was letting me off the hook.
Yeah.
And I said, I'd probably be a little bit of both. And he goes, good boy. He goes, if you're gonna be in that space, you need to be able to do both. You need to be able to sell them when you need to. You need to be able to hold stuff to build long-term wealth. But
goes back to that left brain, right brain stuff. I mean, it's just the yin and yang.
But in hindsight, I look back at these like key things that really were little clues for me. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I think this is what I'm drawn to. I think I understand the logic behind it. And then the story you're talking about is we were working on the Valley Ho, and I had a young. I had a stay-at-home wife and a young child at the time, and I remember it was like 3:30 in the afternoon, and my wife at the time was like, get home, because I need a break from the kid.
Yeah.
But I got this call late in the day, and it was our client saying, hey, I got to go in front of U.S. Bank tomorrow and explain why we're $5.5 million over budget. Can you come up to my office in North Scottsdale and walk me through it so I can speak intelligent? And I'm like, I live in Ahwatukee, and there's no 101, and he's up here at the air park at Scottsdale.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, I remember making the call, to my wife saying, hey, I got to go do this meeting. It's super important. And whether so I remember I didn't feel like making the trek up here. I didn't want to do it, but I'm like, I got to do it. So I drive up, I take the meeting, walk him through it, and we get through it pretty quickly. And our client sits back and he looks at me and says, Lorenzo, what do you want to do with your career?
Yeah.
Are you a lifer at Kitchell? I remember sitting there going, is this a trick question?
Right, yeah.
Because these companies were close with Kitchell.
Yeah.
And this guy's father was close to John Kitchell's father, Sam
Yeah.
Kitchell. I mean, they built Phoenix in the 50s. Like, Kitchell built all the Westcore malls, right? And so I remember sitting there kind of quietly, and I said, I think I'd love to do what you do. Because he was doing these great hotels, boutique hotels and boutique projects. He's a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
Creative, smart, doing entrepreneurial stuff. Design mattered, art mattered, people, the whole thing. It just was like resonated with me. So I was just honest with him. And he goes, so you want to be a developer? And I said, I'd love that. I go, I think that'd be a future. I go, I don't know if I'm able to do that with Kitchell or not,
Yeah. And
he goes, man, you really need to do it. He goes, you have the head for it. You have the head, you have the creativity. He goes, he basically said it'd be a waste for you to just stay working in a corporation just as a manager. Because I was on track to run a division and this whole thing. He goes, does that fire you up? Does it lift your vibration, basically? And I'm like, what, being a manager? And I'm like, nah. I find it kind of soul-sucking, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I wanted to go do creative stuff. And so not even, we're in that conversation, the doorbell rings to his office, and some guy says, hello. It's his father, who his father stops in, who's a really prominent developer in town, Rusty Lyon.
Yeah.
If any developers out there, if you know of him, or his sold his company to Mace Rich, and they did very well. Rusty has trained a lot of developers in town, and his company went through his company. And he was kind of a celebrity in a weird way. Like, if you're a development kind of guy, for me, I was, at the time I'm coming up, everyone talked about Westcore and Rusty Lyon.
That's your world, yeah.
Yeah, it was just our world. And so I was like, he's like, have you ever met my dad? I'm like, no, I'd love to, So his dad came in, and his mom was with him. And Scott Lyon, his son, goes, Dad, this is Lorenzo. He's with Kitchell. And Rusty loved Kitchell, loved Sam Kitchell. And they said, oh, man, we've built a lot in this town together. And he goes, Lorenzo was just telling me that he wants to be a developer. Tells his dad that. I'm just like, oh my God, this iconic developer. I'm like, this little, maybe I'm 30 years old at the time. And Rusty just goes, oh, that's great. He goes, are you writing your business plan? And it kind of threw me off. And I said, no, I go, I wish, kind of deal. He's like, no. He's like, I'm serious. Are you writing your business plan? This was in 2000, end of 05, early 06. Okay. It was probably in 06.
Yeah.
And I said, no. And he takes a whiteboard marker and he draws this S curve. And he goes, well, you got to write your business plan. He goes, you got probably the best opportunity shaping up in your lifetime to start a development company. And he drew an arrow up on the curve and wrote upturn. And he drew an arrow over the hump that said maturity, and then an arrow down that said downturn.
Yeah.
He goes, we are right here right now at maturity. And all the fundamentals show. He's like, son, I've been through this business for years, and it's going to collapse, and it's going to be big. And he goes, and that's when you jump in this business. Here. This is about to happen. It was so prophetic, and I just sat there. I was like a kid, right? Big eyes, watching it, but it made total sense. And he goes, the guys who start here, they chase the market because all they see is the upside. Yeah. They don't know how to respond here because they didn't build it here. Mm-hmm. He goes, if you can get on the right side of the curve here, somewhere in here, and he goes, and try to figure that out. But if you're ready, you'll know it. He says that's when banks start failing. People start committing suicide from the financial pressures. I mean, he described it to a T. And when we started, I started my company January of 2008.
Yeah.
What was that?
There.
Right before.
Right before.
Right before the Great Recession. So he said, these kind of opportunities come like once in a lifetime. And he goes, how old are you? I said, I'm in my early 30s. I was like 33 at the time. 30.
Yeah.
I started my company when I was 34 when I started my company. And so I did. I spent that whole year writing a business plan. Like, I always tell people to do this exercise. I call it the magic wand exercise. Like, if you could wave your magic wand, it doesn't cost you anything. Like, dream.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Right.
And so I just went through that exercise, disciplined. Like, I'd go home at night and write lunchtime, just from the heart.
Yeah.
You know, what I wanted to do. Like, what am I doing? What am I calling myself? Where am I working? What's that look like? What kind of projects am I doing? What kind of people am I working with? I just 33 or 2-page vision document.
Wow.
That just laid it out.
That's
and
cool.
It took me months to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I still read it today and it gives me chills because it really, talking about setting intention,
right.
Manifesting your future. And I'm like, wow, man, that's scripted everything. And that exercise, and it gave me the faith, and I shared that with John Kitchell, who I trusted as a confidant, as a friend. He and I at Kitchell were kind of outliers. We were very creative and a very engineer-minded group, and he was doing his own little entrepreneurial projects on the side, and so was I. I was buying little flip homes, I had these little rentals. I was doing these little creative projects, and I was just loving it. And I was actually making some money on them.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is, and John was too. And so we would always compare notes. And I asked John if he would read, and I confided in him. I said, I'm thinking about doing this. And I told him the whole story with Rusty, and he goes, man, that's fantastic. He was so like fired up that I had that opportunity, but he was really fired up to read my business plan. So I let him read it, and I said, just shoot straight with me, man. Just brutally honest. If I'm pie in the sky, you know. And he read it over a weekend and blew up my phone on a Sunday one day. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? So I call him. I go, what's going on, John? And he's like, dude, I just read your business plan. He goes, I've read it twice. And he's like, man, I have a major problem with it, though. And he kind of, I'm like, oh, what? I'm like, man, did I piss him off? I'm like, seriously, did I piss him off or what? I said, that's cool. I'm like, lay it on me. Like, naive, what? Whatever. Tell me. And he goes, my biggest problem with it is it doesn't include me. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, dude, this is awesome. He goes, I love the vision. He goes, I want to do this with you. Is there any room for me to be part of it? And I was just like, wow. So, you know, and John was in a unique space. His father had passed. The company had transitioned through an ESOP to 100% employee-owned. So John and his siblings and family were coming into estate money that he had to put to work in investments. And he loved real estate. He was doing it himself. And he goes, I don't know how to do this, and I trust you. I know you can do this. So a lot of faith, man. He was going to be 60 in 08. He turned 60 when we started this company 16 years ago.
I mean, it just goes to show, like, good shit doesn't start till you're 50.
Seriously, man. Yeah. So, that was the start of it all. You know, he gave me, I remember driving home kind of in a fog and told my wife at the time, I'm like, wow, John wants to do this with me. Yeah. And the way I had envisioned launching was I was going to go work for some other big developers that I'd built relationships with and just be a fee-for-service guy until you can make some money and maybe go get a home or a little apartment building and
start building.
And with John, he's just like, hey, listen, I'll back you. He goes, I'll back you. I'll seed the launch.
And that was the beginning.
He says, I got a name that might open doors and some gray hair. And I said, man, and I go, I have none of that. I said, I work my butt off for you. And I got an idea and vision. And I know we can do this together. And so
that's beautiful.
It was a total leap of faith. And I gave my notice that year. And I remember I left at the end of 2007. And everyone thought I was nuts. I mean, I was 5 years into a succession planning transition at Kitchell. I was going to run a division. And, I had to be honest with them. In fact, we had an executive retreat, and our bosses told us, show up to this retreat and where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm like, oh no, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready 6 months early, but I'm like, if I'm honest, they're going to probably can me. Yeah. And if I'm not honest, I don't want to be that guy. That company that was just too good to me. Right. I mean, they developed me. They gave me so much education and opportunity and just mentoring. Is that me? It might be. It is me. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
And so Yeah, man. I had to be honest. They were just too good. So I went to the retreat, and John supported me, and I just said, I'm like, well, didn't mean to drop this bomb, but I don't see myself here in 3 years. I see myself running my own company, and they were kind of blown away. My boss, especially, who I'd been shadowing for 5 years to all the executive meetings and stuff, and I just said, hey, with all due respect, I just can't see myself. Now that I have total clear insight as to what you do, we're going into recession. There's just going to be a lot of change, and I just thought, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to, I did well at that company. I just felt like I needed something new, and I needed something that filled my soul. And it was meaningful and impactful. And I just thought, worst case, I was able to leave with an exit. We were employee-owned, so we had a 4-year buyout. And my 4-year buyout of stock ownership was essentially 4 years of annual salary where I was. So I'm like, I got 4 years of income, and I want to invest it. Yeah. And if it doesn't work out, then I'm going to be even more employable from that experience. I can always get a job. And that's how I just kind of leaned on it. Yeah. And I never looked back.
And that's how Venue Projects was started. That's how Venue Projects was started. Yeah. So real quick, tell people some of the projects that you guys have developed around town here.
Sure. Like our very first project was, you were talking about Craig DeMarco. Yeah. And Craig's dear friend. We did the Windsor together. Yeah. Such a cool place. I learned so much from Craig on that project in terms of just being an entrepreneur, a visionary, creative. And so we did Windsor. After that, we did the Newton, which was the old Beefeater on Camelback. Yeah. And we did the Orchard on 12th Street, and that was really wild. And then we did some stuff in Mesa called the Alhambra in downtown. We took an old 1894 hotel and redeveloped it into a private university student housing project for Benedictine University. And then we also did the Rise Hotel. It was a Rive when we did it, but we joint ventured into that project. And it's kind of funny, as we've morphed from these little projects, it's our creativity and our just approach and our process has gotten the attention of bigger developers. And we're doing more joint venture work with bigger developers because they just appreciate. I came from that corporate world, so I'm dreamy, but I'm also balanced in reality. Yeah. I've always had to bank my deals, and I don't want to do things recklessly. So we're doing more joint venture work now, which is fun.
No, that's great. I think. I do want to ask this question that you can kind of tell everybody. And what I gather out of this is, with you, it's live your dream and just go for it and be honest.
Be honest with yourself
and everybody else. I mean, and I guess being honest with yourself is like what you were talking about at the retreat. You're just like, you're not backstabbing anybody.
No,
you're just
I didn't want to be that guy.
Let's lay it out here.
You said, Phoenix is a small town. And I just thought, how can they judge me for being true to what I want to do? And I tell you what, man, they were a class act. They were so supportive. And still, I get notes from people like, man, I can't believe what you're doing, what you've accomplished.
That's great.
They can, but they're like, man, I knew you'd be able to do it, kind of deal. So the votes of confidence are really touching.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I had a friend whose father passed away when I was a sophomore, and he's my best friend in high school. And he was almost like, you ever heard Robert Kiyosaki, like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad? This guy was my rich dad, if you ever read that book.
Yeah, I did.
Very accomplished entrepreneur. Lived in North Central. They exposed me to a whole other world in reality from where I lived. Okay. Right? A whole different mentality around wealth, and you can build wealth and do good, and so philanthropic and whatever. Yeah. And before he passed, I got to sit at the table with them, and he was sort of facing his mortality around cancer, kind of resigned himself that his cancer was terminal. Right. And he told all of us, don't settle. You're blessed to live in this country. And you're blessed with the opportunity to become and do whatever you want. Don't waste it. Yeah. Because when you're sitting in my shoes, you want to look back and when you're facing your deathbed, you want to be able to say, man, I did it.
I did it.
I did it.
There's no doubt.
And I took the leap. And I think about him quite a bit. When the whole pandemic thing went, I remember Kimber and I were sitting there one night when all of us were processing, like, man, are we going to survive this? Yeah. People are dying from it. Like, what is it? Are we going to get sick? What? I remember having this, through all the fear, because our whole world, all our restaurants were closed, no one's paying rent, whatever. I remember just sitting there going, you know what? I go, if it is my time, I'm at peace, man. I did it. I took the leap. I didn't settle for a paycheck.
It's a good feeling.
I just went, and it was a good feeling. I said, I have to go, I'm pretty satisfied. Great kids, great accomplishments.
Yeah.
And I went for it. Through the fear of it all and the anxiety, I did it. And
So instead of just do it, just did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was like, if this is it, at least I went and did it.
100%.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm so glad we got this story out. I have some rapid fire questions for
Sure.
you. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Fall Fest or Devour?
Ooh, I love Devour. I love the setting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun. Will I see you this year?
Yes.
Okay. Van Halen or AC/DC?
Oh, man, I like both. I got to go AC/DC because they remind me of the state fair for some reason.
Your theme? Yeah. Red or green?
Ooh, green.
Okay. Brick or wood?
Brick.
Bookstore or movie theater?
Ooh, bookstore.
Or maybe I should say cinema. Wasn't that
Cinema,
kind of the
yeah.
old word?
Yeah.
Sporting event or concert?
Oh, man, these are tough. I love sports, too.
Do you really? Yeah.
I'm a sports guy.
Yeah. Your boy plays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a field goal kicker.
Yeah, good
Yep.
kicker.
Yep.
Drive time or nap time?
Ooh, I love drive time.
Yeah.
I love driving. It's a good think time for me, good dream time.
I thought you might answer that way.
Yeah.
Ghost or hurricanes?
Ghost.
It's so like, so it makes no sense. Cotton candy or corn dogs?
Cotton candy.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
sweet tooth on you.
Yeah, totally.
So,
I'm a
that's
sweet guy.
That's cool. We'll put some stuff in the show notes. Where can people like see some of your projects online and all that?
Yeah, you can look online at venueprojects.com. You can do a search because we're embarrassingly behind in updating our website.
Yeah.
So there's some projects that aren't on there, but you can always Google us. We've had some good press about some of our projects and what we've worked on and what we're working on.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Yeah,
This was
has
fun.
been fun.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please subscribe, 5-star it, share it, do all that good stuff. I love hearing people's stories. Again, this is, I think, my 4th year in doing the podcast, so we're just cranking along. But thanks again for coming, and till next time, peace out.